All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another week of the Photo EQR podcast, sponsored by the Academy of Art University. My name is Elliot, and I will be your host for this week. So this week is our second official podcast. Last week was our first. So hopefully we maybe get some actual students or viewers at all in this week, and we can have a bit more of a chat and discussion with everyone. But if not, this will still be going up on YouTube as a video afterwards. It can be used more as just a tutorial video, for anyone who wants it, whether you're an AAU student or just interested in what we are going to discuss today, which is Lightroom. We went over Lightroom a bit last week, more specifically Lightroom Classic. And we went through kind of what it offered, the very basics of Lightroom, how to import photos, add keywords, organize them in collections. But then we did kind of a brief overview of all the different modules in Lightroom: the library module, editing module, the print module, all of them, even the book and web module we touched on a bit. This week, though, we're going to focus a lot more down on the two main ones, which are library and editing. And we're going to go through and really focus on editing a photograph in Lightroom and the workflow that's involved. Once it's imported in Lightroom, what is the workflow to getting an edited and ready photograph? To typically move on into Photoshop, but sometimes the edits you do in Lightroom are enough for the final project. It really depends on the photograph and on your style as a photographer and how deep you want the edits to go. I think today we'll see. It might be a bit of a shorter stream than typical, especially if we don't get anyone in chat watching us live. I'm just going to reiterate a bit of what this podcast is, since it's still only our second official podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Academy of Art University. And I myself am an employee of the school. I'm a photo technician here at the equipment room. We're doing this podcast really to support both online and in-person students and provide a platform to answer questions and provide feedback and a bit of a community, an online community for the students. But if you're not an Academy of Art student and you just have an interest in photography, you're definitely welcome here. And you can feel free to participate in the live chat or leave comments down below if you're watching this as a video. So with that out of the way, let's go and take a look at Lightroom and see what a typical editing workflow looks like, at least for me. This is something that is somewhat specific per person. And as you get better with Lightroom, as you find your way with the program, you'll probably find you have your own workflow that works best for you. But I'll go through how I think about it. And that will hopefully give you a good starting point and a bit of a guide on, what you should be looking for when you look at your own work in Lightroom. So let me go ahead and share the stream or share the screen so we can take a look at Lightroom. Once again, we're still working on a few technical issues like avoiding this craziness that happens when we share. Hopefully we can get something like OBS Studios installed soon. But so far we're still working through just YouTube webcam. So bear with us for these first few streams. So we'll go ahead and hide this. And you will see here we are in Lightroom, in the library tab. We're going to be working with this group of photos here. We did landscapes last week, so I decided to do a studio session this week. These are taken pretty recently, at the beginning of this week, I think. And I can't take full credit for these photos. This was a bit more of a team effort. I certainly helped, but it was me and another person, a student, Chris, who shot these. The idea behind this was really to get the bottle falling through the water in a nice crisp photograph of this. This was just some random bottle, an E&J bottle, brandy, I guess, that we found in the prop closet. And yeah, so we're going to go through. We'll start here, and you'll see I already did a few things. If you watched the previous stream, you will know a few things that we start with. So we've already imported the files. You can see we have them here in this folder, 19 in total, and that will mirror, of course, what our actual hard drive looks like. There's our folder with all of them in there, just like we see in Lightroom. We then again added them to a collection, podcast week 2. This is the collection we'll be working in. And that's just for a little bit more of organization. And then we went ahead and keyworded all of them. This is a good workflow to get into, importing them, putting them in a collection or two that they fit in, and then keywording. And that is kind of what we did. We went more into detail about how to do this and why you should do this last week. So I'm going to just tell you I did it this week already, and repeat that. It's a good workflow to get into, because Lightroom is all about organization, and keywording is the key part to that. Once we've done that, we're going to go over to develop. And we're just going to look at these photographs. I'm going to use Shift Tab to get rid of the sidebars. I'm going to zoom in and try to figure out which one I like the best. The main thing I'm looking for here is focus. Which one has the best focus and sharpness, especially here in the label. And I will give them a rating 1 to 5. Depending on how good they are. Most likely none of them will make it up to 5 instantly. Here we have some focus on the bottle cap, as you guys see. And our bubbles up here are pretty sharp, but our main label is pretty soft, and we actually have a bubble blocking the E. This first one we have is actually pretty good. It's a decent sharpness here. Sharpness is going to be pretty hard to get. We have a lot of motion with the bottle dropping, of course, through the water. And of course, we're shooting through glass and a few inches of water as well. So getting a very sharp label is going to be nearly impossible. And so we're going to probably have to add a bit of sharpness and clarity to these shots quite a bit. I like this one a good amount, though. It's decently sharp. And you can see we are, due to a slightly slower splash sync speed. But we have a pretty cool reflection here, and relatively decent sharpness in our main label. So I'm going to give that one a 1 star. This is the one we just looked at. This one is actually pretty darn sharp. But once again, we have a bubble kind of blocking our label. It's not the biggest issue, especially because this is not, a paid assignment. If this was not just for fun and something to look cool, if we were shooting for E&J as the company, they probably would not want their label blocked. You want to really have a clear reading of the name. So I'll give this one 1 star. It probably won't make it past that. Here's one that looks promising. Not super sharp, pretty clear. You can definitely read the label clearly. Our gel is coming through nicely with the red hints here and a bit of blue on this side. We had posing gels, red on the left, blue on the right. So this one's pretty nice. We're a little underexposed. If we look at our histogram here, we're definitely way to the left. Shadows really is where everything is for this photo. So let's go past that one. This one's one of my favorite in terms of overall look. But once again, we're pretty soft. But we have nothing blocking the label, so we'll give this one a star rating. And star ratings I used to work my way through. I'll pick out, I'll narrow it down from, these 19 to, the top, 10 or something. And then I'll do basic edits and see which ones move up to 2 stars after the basic edit. And then, we'll slowly narrow it down to the top 1 or 2, which will get some final edits. Then we'll be ready for exporting or moving into Photoshop. This one's, once again, we have a sharp top, but our main label is pretty darn soft. And there's nothing too special about the bubbles or anything. I think we'll skip past this one. This one's one of the worst for focus. I think, once again, somewhat better up here near the bottle cap, but our actual label is pretty soft. I like the bubbles quite a bit. And our histogram is still pretty bad. We're definitely pretty underexposed on all these. Mostly so our sync speed could be low. We couldn't crank our flash as high as we needed. Pretty soft. We definitely have some motion blur in here. I think we'll skip that one. Yeah, still pretty blurry. I don't know how much delay there is on your guys' side. Hopefully nothing crazy. This one's pretty cool. We really get the red gel lighting up the label. And it's not the worst in terms of focus for sure. I might move this one to the next stage. This one's pretty blurry, but the water's really cool. Definitely motion blur in the water. We're not freezing it solid. We'll think about this one. I like the water a lot. That's pretty sharp there. And towards the bottom here, this one I think is good. Pretty soft focus, but our water is super sharp here. If you look at that, very sharp water, almost no motion at all on our water. We just missed the focus. It's quite hard. You set your manual focus and you got to drop the bottle in. It's really just pure luck at that point, whether the focus is solid or not. Here's one that's decent. Let's go back one. I might move this one forward actually. You'll see I'm not as picky as a lot of people probably would be, especially because this is more for fun than anything. I even like this one. We have this, of course, the light reflecting here. Either the light moved or the camera angle moved a bit compared to the previous ones. If we go back a few, that disappears. I think that's easy enough. We'll simply crop that out. The entire right side is just wasted space, empty space. Yeah, this one is pretty good, pretty sharp. Oh yeah, look at that. That's very sharp once it fully loads in. The biggest problem is we're sitting on the towel and we lose this corner, which means it's almost impossible. If this was a true, client shoot, paid photo shoot. So while the sharpest so far, without a doubt, because it's hitting the bottom, it's not floating anymore. It's pretty much a wasted image because the Photoshop work to get this corner out that's hidden by the towel is probably more of a pain than it's worth. I'll bring it over so we're doing Lightroom only and we aren't going into Photoshop. And it is the sharpest that we have to work with. I think this one's actually a little better. We're still pretty sharp, though it's hard to tell because we have all these bubbles blocking it and adding some blurriness to it. But our red gel really stands out. Well, we lose the top of the bottle as well, which is bad. Let's see, this guy is very bright. Our label is really picking up that red gel. As we look through, it's actually have to tell how sharp it is because it's a bit overexposed almost with the silver label hitting the gel. But I think it's decent enough. Let's bring it through and see what we can do with it. This one, once again, it's sitting on the bottom. It's not as great. This one, how sharp is it? There's another one that's pretty sharp. Let's go back and see if our sharpness pops in or not. And choose between one of these. I almost like this one. The label's up and a bit brighter. This one is down. So let's go with this one over this one. And all right, and that's it. And we can narrow this down. We started with 19. And we should, hopefully, be able to add our star rating and narrow it down. I don't know why it won't let us. There we go. It's add a star rating. And now we got down to 10. We took out 9 of them that we didn't like. We didn't think were quite good enough. And then we can edit. I think our first thing we will do for most of these is just crop them. They all have plenty of empty space. All of them have the ugly towel we used to make sure the bottle didn't break at the bottom. So we're going to go through and we're going to pretty much crop all of these and maybe do a bit of an exposure adjustment. All of ours are underexposed in the shadows without anything really in the highlights or even in the midtones, really. Very little midtones, almost all shadows. Part of that is simply we have a ton of empty space with a black background. Let's go ahead and crop. As I said last time, I like to keep the lock on and keep a ratio. Let's try to crop these as 4x5s in their vertical form. I think will be good. If we can fit the whole bottle, there we go. That's the whole bottle. That's pretty close. We have a good amount of empty space on the bottom. We could try 5x7 is even skinnier. If we rotate it the other way, we could do something like this if we want. I think that's a pretty good crop. If we're not doing anything. Then we're going to try to fix our exposure a bit. Now let's push the whole thing over. Let's say we need a full stop. We'll go up one full stop. And our histogram here is much more balanced for sure. It does add, as you can see, a lot of detail and stuff. That's kind of cool, also kind of distracting, depending on how you want to view it. But then we'll see if we can get, let's see if auto does. This is a somewhat gold label in real life. I wish I had the bottle here with me to show you, but it's in a whole nother building, sadly. But yeah, the label is somewhat gold in real life. So let's see if we do daylight, if that changes. That's actually almost a little better. Our glass loses that somewhat warm tone and becomes more clear and neutral. Cloudy is obviously too warm. Shades crazy. Tungsten, of course, is terrible. Flash, we were technically using flash, so that should be pretty accurate. I think we'll choose between daylight and flash, and there's very little difference between the two. Most flashes are designed to replicate daylight light, so I think we'll leave it there. And then we're going to simply, I think, move on. Well, let's not do that. I'll show you something that I meant to show last time, but we didn't do. So let's do a full basic edit on this one. But then we will apply that edit, except for the crop, across all of them. And this is something known as batch editing. It's something Lightroom is known for. And it can really save you a lot of time to edit one photograph and apply it to all similar photographs to give you a pretty good starting place on all of them. So let us go ahead and do a full basic edit on these going through. We will add some contrast. We want this is the very contrasty photo. The bottle hitting the water, with the black background to really make everything pop. And all the water bubbles, we really want separation pretty high. We will want to push our highlight up, but without clipping anything. So let's push that up. We don't have anything clipping too much, maybe a bit in here, but I think we will, I like how the water's looking. We'll maybe tone this down with a local adjustment. Our shadows, we probably actually want to pull down. We can get some detail of these water bubbles, which are kind of cool by going up. But then we kind of end up with a bit of a gray background instead of a black background. So I think we're going to go down. For our whites, we're going to see if we're blowing. We are blowing out a few areas, like right here is blown out, this highlight, and a few bubbles. I might go up just a bit. I don't mind that this highlight's blown out. I want to go until we start getting some stuff in the label. And right there, we're getting the edge of the label. So let's go down until about right there, +8. I think is pretty good for this shot. I don't go black. We want to go till we get a pure black showing up somewhere. And our yellow is appear to be the darkest. So right up there, we're starting to do it. Now we have a very good amount of contrast in this image. Finally, we want to add a bit of clarity. Because we're pretty soft on the focus, we'll probably push this pretty high, like 28 or so. I don't think there's much reason to push our color. It might almost be cool to have this as a black and white. We might make one of these 10 a black and white version. I think that looked pretty cool when we did that. But for now, let's leave it. Maybe we'll push it just a little, +10. Get a little color going in our glass. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select all 10. And you'll see we went from here, it said previous and reset. When we select them, our previous button changes to sync. And we can click sync and choose everything we want to sync together. And we want everything except the crop. We don't want the crop. We'll crop every photo individually. Of course, if we applied one crop to all of them, we'd probably end up cutting the bottle off. If this was a more still shot, landscape, or even just a different type of still life where nothing really moved and the framing didn't really change, you could apply your crop across the entire series. But because we're dropping the bottle and it's moving its location in the frame each time, each one will probably require a different crop. But we can go ahead and synchronize, and it'll take a little while. The faster your computer is, the faster the edits will apply across all your images, of course. But without a doubt, it's much faster than doing what we just did, across all 10. And now you can see all 10 of these have that basic adjustment that we just did, which is great because now we can pretty much go through, crop them all, and then go through and pick out our favorites from there and see which ones get the next layer of adjustments. So let's keep our 4x5 crop. Let's just go, I like 4x5. It's a pretty standard size. I'm going to get rid of this bottom part and keep the top. Obviously, the more you crop in, the more data you're throwing away, and the smaller your final image becomes. Because we shot this on a very expensive Phase 1 camera, if we look at our metadata, you can see these are 100 megapixel files, so we have plenty of data to work with. If we throw out, if we go here and we're throwing out in our crop 60% of the image, typically that's bad. If you have a 20 megapixel camera and you're cropping out 60% of that, you're left with, not even 10 megapixels of data in your final image. But because we have a pretty massive file to start with, we're cropping out 50, 60%. We still have 50, 60 megapixels to work with, which is plenty, and definitely an advantage of working with a $60,000 Phase 1 camera, which we have available here at the school. If you're interested in them, you got to take the class before you can use them, but it's definitely worth it, and a skill that's definitely could take you places in the photo world. I like this one a lot, actually. Look how sharp this bottom is. I'm going to give this one 2 stars already. All right, let's see about a crop here. I'm going to stick, 4x5. Kind of like the horizontal. Let's give it a little more space. That looks pretty good. If you didn't know, F will give you a full screen view. And that will allow you to really look at it and see what we're seeing in terms of detail and sharpness. You can even zoom in from there. I think we're getting, that one's pretty soft, but I love the splash on this one. It's definitely one of my favorites so far, despite the softness. Let's go here. This one has one of the best gel effects on it. Let's rotate this to a more vertical. This one definitely has some of the coolest gel effects with the red gel lighting up these bubbles here, where it's really hitting the label, turning it into almost a red label, like the sun's hitting it. We get a reflection up top. So let's keep going. And let's see, is this one better? This one's pretty basic. It's even a little overexposed. Probably part of that's the edits we applied. This one was slightly brighter than all the rest. But of course, all the edits we applied are just a starting point for sure. There's no doubt about that. You definitely don't want to edit one, apply it to all of the ones in the series, and then call it good. You'll definitely consider it a starting point, go through them all, and make adjustments from there. And that's what we'll do today for sure, and show you kind of how that is done as well. Because despite, this being essentially the same setup in every photograph, the camera didn't move, the lights didn't move, the power level stayed, I think, pretty much the same once we got it good. After a few tests, the power level stayed essentially the same. The only thing that changed was how the bottle fell into the water. And despite that, you can see just the crazy amount of changes we see from one photo to the next. It's quite astounding how just the angle of your product can change these things. I think we have changed angles a bit. We're now looking much more up compared to these first few where we're getting the bottle both out and in of the water, which was a cool effect we started doing in the second half of the shoot. This looks like it's the only one that really pulled that off, though. All the others are either all the way under. This is our last one. We'll give it a bit of a crop. And then we'll go back through and see which ones are our favorite. I think this one, despite being pretty nice, we could definitely fix the highlight exposure here. Because it's laying on the towel, I don't think it's quite good enough to move through. We do have a super sharp label. If we wanted to really do a crazy tight crop and leave it at something like that, where we have the sharp label, with the bubbles coming up, that could be an interesting thing. But I think we'd be throwing away too much information at that point. So I think we'll move on. This one, I think, is, if it changes, I think this one, simply because it's the only one we have partially in and out of the water, and a pretty sharp label. I think this one we'll give 2 stars. It's sitting on the bottom or very close to it, which is a bit of a pain. But as I said, it's more of a pain if we were doing a full edit and moving this into Photoshop. The towel's obviously pretty ugly. For a final image, we'd want to remove that in Photoshop. But since this is just, we're drawing through some basic Lightroom edits and what you can do, I think we'll move that along. This one is just pretty similar to the last one on the towel, but it's not in or out, it's fully under the water. So the last one's just a better version, I think. This one's pretty great. I'm going to get rid of our adjustment there because it's blowing this out completely, just to see how our focus is. It's a little soft, both on top here and here, but our water itself is very sharp. And I like what we're getting in the bottle. The red lights are interesting. I honestly don't like them, though. I think they're distracting from the bottle, and we'll probably edit those out. But despite that, I think we'll move it forward. This one, let's kind of do the same thing. Yeah, it's pretty sharp. Pretty darn sharp, but and that's pretty sharp. Let's move this one forward. We already said we moved this one forward. Let's maybe find one more. This looks pretty soft. There's nothing too special about it. Same with this one, pretty soft label here. It looks like maybe it hadn't fully loaded. It does look a little sharper now that it's fully loaded. And we got good red. I like these red streaks. And we're off the ground for sure. So let's do that. Let's say these, let's see how many we went. These 5, we cut it in half. These 5 are final 5. And we'll see if we maybe get down to 2 in the end. All right, so let's start. This is the one I think we've been editing. Let's go through a few more edits here. We're pretty happy with where we are here. Let's take a look at our tone curve and our histogram. I think without a doubt we want brighter highlights. So let's push our highlights up a good bit, as well as our light. Let's say we do like 20 and 15. You can always check, use the eyeball here to kind of see the effect. Click it, hold it down to get rid of the edit, and then let go to see the edit. And I definitely like that. We're definitely getting a bit more of a pop in our highlights, especially in our water in the top here. Let's see. Do we want to add some detail? I think we want to push our shadows up here. We can see it affecting our cap a bit. So we want to pull a bit more detail into our cap. We'll pull our shadows up. But to add a bit of contrast, we might pull our darks down and get our background a bit darker. So there's a pretty simple tonal curve. You can definitely see how it helps the photo pop. It adds a good amount of contrast. It definitely brightens up our highlights a good amount, giving them a nice shininess that they were missing before. For our color mixer, we can play around. I think we have a few colors. We have our red here. We have the bottle, of course, has a few different colors mixed in. Then we have our gold label. So let's look at our red. Let's see if we can, I don't know if we necessarily want to deepen it. We don't want to change the hue because that will, I think our color accuracy is pretty good. Without the bottle in front of us, it's hard to tell how great our color accuracy is. But by changing it, we're definitely, of course, it might look cool to have a pink bottle cap, but it's definitely not accurate to the bottle. If we're pretending we're shooting this for a client, we definitely want to keep it accurate. The only 2 we should play with a bit, or maybe our saturation, if we think it needs to be a little more saturated. And our luminance, do we want to be darker or lighter? But I think lighter is definitely the way to go. Push the brightness of our red up a bit to help make it pop. And once again, we can kind of see the change from that to that. Really all we're doing is lightening the top. We're also getting a bit of the red here on the label, of course. But we're not getting the edge red, which is interesting. It's a bit too far off. So let's get that red and do a Clint is close enough. All right. Let's see what our bottle itself. Or do we want to? Let's do our bottle and see what we can do with that. We can definitely probably want to lighten it a bit, similar to what we did to the cap. It is glass, of course, nice glass bottle, very reflective. We want to represent that. But then we can choose. This is more artistic. Do you want your bottle to show the color of the glass, by pushing the saturation up? Or do you want it to make it look more like a clear bottle by going down? I think we'll go up, but not a crazy amount. I just enjoy colorful images. If they're not black and white, I enjoy more saturated color. This is either a personal choice or a choice your client will make on how you try to match this. Color grading, we could look, maybe in the shadows we want some blue in our water if we want to give some, but I think it's affecting our bottle too much. What about midtones? So I think we will find a way. Our highlights, we could add some highlights here that affect pretty much the bottle and some of the bubbles. If we want to warm it up, I think we'll leave this alone. I don't think there's any real reason to color grade this yet. We might try to color grade just the background to give that water a bit more of a blue tone. But that will be a more specific adjustment than what we can get right here. Detail will be important for us. This is our sharpening. So let's zoom in here and try to add a good amount of sharpening. We probably want to, let's do a 1.2 radius. We hold option down. Let's zoom in here on our label, hold option down, and we can kind of see a black and white effect of how sharp our image is going to be. And getting into black and white is very helpful for this. It really shows you just the lines without much. And then we're going to mask this. Masking is how much of the picture do you want sharpened and how much you don't. The higher you mask, if we hold option down again, the more that's black. Everything that's black is not getting sharpened. Everything that's white is. So you want to pick a point where a good amount of what you want is sharpened, but stuff that shouldn't be sharpened, like the water, isn't. So we're going to go pretty high on that because we have a lot of just empty space in this water over here. And there's no need to sharpen that. The only thing we need sharp is our bottle and some of these water droplets up here. If you want to play with noise reduction, you can. We shot this at a very low ISO. We can go and check the metadata for that. We shot this at ISO 35. Probably one of the reasons we're so underexposed is for that reason. It maybe would have been good for us to push to ISO 50. But for that reason, we have pretty much no noise and no reason to touch noise reduction for this image. Lens correction, let's see if I can find the lens. And it can. So we'll definitely want to check that box. Didn't look like there's much distortion in this lens. It's a very expensive lens, so you would hope so. transform. There's no real need to transform this. It's not an architectural shot where we need all of our angles to line up perfectly. It's pretty artistic. If we wanted a lens blur effect, we could, to try to blur out maybe some of this water. We could play around with this, and I'll show it to you just for the fun of it, but I think it's something we won't end up using. Let's see what it does. All right, there you go. That's an interesting effect for sure. Completely blurring out the background and making the bottle pop. And we could lower this effect probably a good amount. That was pretty extreme. It's definitely interesting. I think we won't do it. I want everything front to back sharp for this image. Maybe we'll apply it to one of the others effects. If we wanted an effect like a bit of a vignette, we could. We might actually do a small black vignette to draw your eye into the bottle. I think that'll be good. There's definitely no reason to bring grain in. This is meant to be a very sharp, very modern looking image. And adding grain would definitely detract from that. And calibration, our last one, we could play around. This affects our colors. It recalibrates the colors, your primary colors. And I don't think there's much reason to it. Maybe we push our saturation up a bit for all of them just to make everything pop a little more, especially the blues maybe. But I think that's pretty good. We have a pretty good image here. So if there was a few things I would want to get rid of, it might be up here. It's a little hot. So let's zoom in on this bottle cap and maybe add a radial gradient, a very small one. It lets us see it over our bottle cap. Come on. We'll do our best to line it up and size it correctly. And we'll maybe pull our highlights down there. That way they're not quite so blown out. And we can see the effect. Once we're here, we can turn it on and off, similar to all the rest. And I like that. Brings the matches. I think you get a much more, the color matches from the top of the cap to the bottom, and it's not as blown out. If we want to do another one, we could try select subject. I'm a bit curious how good the AI is with this, and it does a pretty good job. And we could maybe push the contrast in our bottle just a little more, really make it pop and push our shadows a bit. The other thing we wanted to try to do is give us a bit of a blueness to our water. We had a blue gel that was attempting to do that, and you can kind of see at the top we have a bit of blue, but it didn't fully work, probably because we have a black background. Mostly, I think if we had a white background, we maybe would have had a bit more of that blue color come in. But we can actually do that here. So let's go to Mask 2, and we are going to duplicate and invert this mask. And this should select everything that's not the bottle. And it didn't do a perfect job, but we can fix that a bit. More importantly, what we're going to do here is we can adjust the water. We're going to push our highlights up a bit. I think we can give all those water bubbles a good bit of highlight to make them pop a little more. And then we can either play with color temperature and just move it down a bit to give us a bluer look, or we can use the color overlay function and choose a color, green, red, whatever color we want that we like. And I like this method a lot more than just playing with the color temperature. Being able to choose any of these colors we want to kind of overlay on the specific part of the image we want. It gives us a real creative way, I think, to do a color grade effect to a very specific part of the image. So why don't we do that? And we can see the difference. Without it, we have a very black, plain background, almost black and white. And with it, we definitely get a bit more of a blue tone with it, with our highlights popping a bit without blowing out the bottle. And so, yeah, I think that is pretty close to a final edit that we can achieve here in Lightroom. Everything else I would probably do in Photoshop. If I wanted to get rid of some of these dots, if I thought these were distracting from the bottle, I would do that in Photoshop. You could technically do it here with the removal tool, but I think Photoshop would do a superior job. Without a doubt. I think our histogram's still pretty low. Let's see if we can increase our overall exposure just a bit. Maybe 1.2. All right, let's move on. Maybe we won't do all of these. I think we're taking a pretty long amount of time. So let's do one more. Let's do this one because I think we will get rid of these dots. I think these are obviously enough to get rid of. I'm live right now. Yes. Timothy, is that you? All right, give me 1 second, guys. Hey, Paul.
Did you see Timothy?
Yeah, I didn't see Timothy. He was shooting in 450.
No, I don't see.
But if he's not there anymore, I don't know where he is. Right. Okay, sorry. All right, sorry about that, everyone. How are we doing? Anyone live yet? Nope. What? 2? All right, someone out there is watching. Participate in the chat if you want, if you got questions. All right, but back here, let's finish up with just one more. We're nearing our hour mark, which is kind of, we don't want to push too far past that. Especially if these are just going to end up being more demo videos than live streams. So far, we don't have a ton of you watching. One person, shout out to whoever you are. Hopefully you're enjoying this. But for the broader community, let us know in the comments below this video whether you like the idea of these being live and having the option to participate live, or if you prefer these to be more curated videos in the future. because there's definitely pros and cons to each. The live setting I think is cool. Get your questions answered live directly from us or from me and the other techs. But if we do more of a curated video, we could definitely curate it and do a broader range of things. We could go film in the dark room or something, or in a photo studio and do a bigger setup, and film that and put that together into a more curated video. Compared to what we could do live, we could definitely move into a studio live and try to do like a lighting demo one day. But it wouldn't be quite as smooth as we might hope. But all right, let's figure out which one of these do we think is best. This one's got a cool color grade from the gel here. I like these lines a lot. But I think the labels, despite the cool color of the label, it's pretty off from what it should be. This one's interesting, a bit basic, I think. This is the one I'm kind of looking at as our second best, because we've got some cool lines with the gels. We don't have too many air bubbles catching them. I think enough to get rid of, or a few enough to get rid of with Lightroom's removal tool, and no need to go to Photoshop. Or with this one where we have the cool, it's both in the water and out of the water. But sadly, we have a pretty bad bottom third of the photo. So let's do this one. And do a final edit for this one. Take a look, and I'll show you a few more cool tricks that we can do. We said we were going to do one as black and white, so we'll do this one and maybe one as a black and white as well. Let's start by getting rid of some of these dots we don't like. And so I prefer, as I said last time, with the healing one, the middle one. And we can use the bracket keys, left bracket to make it smaller, right bracket to make it larger. You do want it to be slightly larger than what you're getting rid of. And we'll go through and do our best to get rid of some of the bigger ones. You can hold spacebar to get the little hand symbol. We're definitely dealing with a bit of a delay. The computer has a bit of a hard time doing both the live stream and running a program like Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop at the same time. You want to avoid that. If that happens, just move the circle. All right, let's see how we do. Let's zoom out. We did pretty good. There's a bit of a green dot here. Let's get rid of that. Let's do that. Let's say we like that. Are you not? Why do we have just a white circle there? I don't like that. All right, that's just a delay error. All right, so where we have our basic edit, I think we could once again push our exposure even higher. We could push this probably almost a little over half a stop to balance out our general exposure. And then we will go ahead and kind of do what we did before. But let's start, I think because we have such a blown out label here, let's start with our subject select and try to select our bottle. We want to bring down our highlights to get our label back but we want the overall bottle to be brighter. And we might just max it out on the shadows, really get as much detail and stuff as we can in there. And you can definitely see a pretty dramatic shift without our label being too bad. We should be able to add a good amount of sharpness to this guy. And clarity should also be so. Let's add some clarity. And because we're working on just the bottle right now, let's add a little bit of texture as well. We are working with glass, so we don't want a ton of texture or anything. But I think a little bit, maybe even just a tiny bit, like 6 or something, will be good. And then we can actually do our contrast curve or our tonal curve. We'll try to add a bit of contrast with it here as a linear or as a mask instead. So we want to push our highlights and lights up a bit. We're going to add a bit of contrast. Do a pretty basic little curve. And then I think once again we will duplicate and invert this. And I think we got a pretty good selection. If you don't like the selection, you can add or subtract here. So we might subtract with our brush, and we'll make it a much smaller brush. Here, I think you got a bit of the bottle here, so we'll paint that out of the mask. I think right here as well. We can paint in a bit of the bottom. If we do too much, we just did a little too much. We can switch back over to add. And kind of, we can really fix any mistakes pretty easily that the AI does when it attempts to mask something. It's getting better by the day. I think Photoshop is still slightly superior. But once we do that, we can do our next adjustment. Let's say we want this to be a pretty dark background. What if we want almost a super high contrast background with almost everything black except our highlights? We'll push our bubbles and highlights pretty high. And this should affect the background and nothing else. Once again, if we want a color tone, we can add one in here. If we want, blue is probably the way to go. Just click around until we get something close. Because we went so dark, we might want a darker blue than we did last time. So we'll stay up there, then maybe drop down. Let's do that. I think that looks pretty good. This may be a bit dramatic. Well, that's all right. All right, I'm also going to show you another cool trick, and that's the ability to intersect this with something. So let's intersect this mask with a linear gradient and go from bottom left, top right, if it lets us. I thought I did that. Give it a moment. Or let me retry. There we go. Let me retry. But then we will have somewhat bluer water down here, and some of these bubbles up here will remain a lighter, clearer color, and the blue will affect more this side. I still think our label is too bright. Let's see if we can fix that with our general. Let's go ahead and add another mask. Maybe we'll just paint this one. And go down, and we'll make it a little bigger, and we'll just paint as best we can our label. If we go over a bit, I don't think it's a big issue. I think we did decent there. I think we're slowly getting there, you know. You can definitely spend a lot of time in Lightroom before you go to Photoshop. You know, a lot of this, especially the smaller edits we're doing here with masks, can be done in Photoshop. A lot of people will simply do these basic edits, these global edits, then simply move to Photoshop and do all their masking in Photoshop. But I think it's good to take advantage of what Lightroom Classic offers and use all the tools they have, including the masking. Let's do one more as our black and white. Let's see which one. Maybe our first one. Or let's take our first one, and we can create a virtual copy of this. And this will allow us to do more than one edit per photo, which is a really cool thing. We can, in theory, do this an infinite amount of times. You know, if you need, for example, what we're doing right now, we need a black and white version, we need a color version. You know, instead of doing one edit, exporting it, and then resetting everything and doing a second edit, you know, and losing that first edit, you can simply create a copy, a virtual copy, and keep all your edits separate. So I think this is a black and white. We will go in here and find our inverted mask. And we will get rid of our color grade that we added and keep it a true black and white. And besides for that, I think we want to push our contrast even higher. Let's look at our black and white mixer and see what we can do. Yeah, we can push our red up a good amount. Our orange, we want to go up a little or down. I actually almost like going down. I like what that does to our label. Green will be our label again. I kind of like where it is, maybe down a bit, darken it up a bit. Our blue is mostly affecting the glass. I think we want to push this up a good amount. This is affecting, yeah, definitely, let's push that. I like that at 100. It was pretty extreme, but purple, I don't see that affecting anything. In magenta, it's affecting our cap again. I think we want the brightest cap possible. And for whatever reason, minus 100 gives us our brightest cap. So we can start there with our basic go from that to that. We definitely add some highlight and some pop to our bottle and to our splash into our water up there as well. You can color grade your black and white images. We're going to leave this as a true black and white. And maybe this is the one. We'll do a black and white with artificial lens blur. And that'll really help separate the bottle as we saw before. And we can play around with what these do. We have our circle, modern, circular lens, 5-blade, bubble. Yeah, what are you? Ring and let's do a mirrorless lens. And we can, I don't know what cat eye does. Let's push it to 100 and see. All right, well, we broke it. Ha! That's what we do. Push everything to the limit. Honestly, well, it looks like it gives you more depth of field. I'll play with that a bit more myself. If you guys know what that does, adjust the shape of the out of focus light source. Interesting. I think we'll leave it at 50. I kind of like what that does to these water bubbles out back here. Maybe even push it a little higher. Let's do like 65, so we can blur those even more while we keep our bottle and some of these closer water drops nice and sharp. Let's push our vignette even farther. Let's do like a 35 vignette. Now we've really narrowed in. It's like 35 was a bit too much. We started going into the bottle because it's a bit low in the frame. Let's add, I'm going to add a select subject mask. We already have one, but we're going to do a linear gradient on this and go from one side to the other to give a bit of directionality to the light. We're going to push our highlights and our overall exposure just a bit. And this will help give our bottle a bit more shape, I think, by giving the light some directionality. And there we go. Let's give our top 3 stars. This was the other one we did. And then we took it from 19 down to 3 final images. We go to library and we put them side by side. And here are 3 images that are what I would consider pretty much fully edited within the terms of what you can do in Lightroom. They're cropped, the exposure is rebalanced to be correct, the clarity and sharpness is given back to them, and there's some creative stuff we've done with color, with focus, especially on this one in the middle. We gave it some artificial blur. We made sure our colors were as accurate as possible. Without the bottle here, I'm working pretty much off memory. But I think we did pretty good. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. You can kind of see the workflow of working with a group of images, narrowing them down, doing some edits, narrowing them down some more to the best, that way you're not, if you start, we only had 19 images this time, but a lot of times you'll have dozens, hundreds of images to go through, and the ability to use Lightroom to do a batch edit, edit one, apply it to 100, and then go through those 100, pick out the top, 50, and then do another quick batch edit of those 50 with a few more adjustments, and get it down to the top 25, and so on and so forth, until you get down to the top 10. And those 10 you can take, into Photoshop or something for the final edits before, you print them out or you send them off to your client. And that is, one of the greatest powers of Lightroom is really quick edits for large groups of photos. And yeah, hopefully, you got something out of this. If you have questions, leave them down in the comments. And as always, we're looking for more ideas. If you're a student here at AAU, let us know what you are working on in class. If you have any questions or struggles you're having that you might want covered on this podcast, and if you're not a student, let us know what your interests are. And maybe you have a real interest in the cameras that these were shot on. Not many people know about Phase 1 cameras. They're quite interesting. We could do a demo here one week to maybe show you what they are, get you interested. And yeah, I think we'll leave it there. We're well past an hour. I'm almost at an hour and 20 minutes. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Let me stop. All right. Thank you, everyone.